The esoteric author Joe Bandel claims that by pushing your physical and mental limits into a state of absolute chaotic excess, you can rupture unseen astral barriers and force a quantum leap in your own psychological evolution. This provocative thesis sits at the center of Chapter 8 in his book The Oak Matrix Unleashed, where he frames the generation of extreme bioelectrical energy as the ultimate tool for personal empowerment. The claim is that society's obsession with moderation is actually a trap, keeping us in a state of confusion. To break free, Bandel suggests we must intentionally generate chaos through physical exertion, intense study, thrill-seeking, or deep meditation until our internal systems undergo a radical transformation. Noah, this philosophy asks the reader to treat their daily existence as a crucible, actively pursuing maximum effort in every endeavor to achieve what he calls godhood. It is a demanding, punishing worldview that rejects the modern wellness industry's focus on balance and comfort.
The framework Bandel builds relies heavily on tension. He uses the metaphor of an oak tree straining against severe winds until its bark physically cracks. That violent rupture is not framed as damage, but as the necessary catalyst for releasing sap to fuel new growth. Bandel is taking concepts from self-improvement and filtering them through an esoteric, almost alchemical lens. He views the human body and mind as a bioelectrical circuit. When you engage in intense acts, whether that is sprinting until your lungs burn, engaging in tantric focus, or pushing through the exhaustion of late-night study, you are generating a surplus of this vital force. Most people hit a threshold of discomfort and stop. Bandel insists that stopping is the moment you secure your own mediocrity. If you push past that threshold, the accumulated energy shatters the energetic barriers, or what he calls the astral, clearing away mental confusion and manifesting tangible power.
My immediate resistance to this idea stems from basic human physiology. We are biologically wired to seek homeostasis. When we experience intense stress, our bodies release cortisol, our sympathetic nervous system shifts into fight or flight, and if that state is prolonged, we experience profound burnout. The idea of intentionally sustaining constant maximal effort feels like a recipe for systemic collapse. But I want to contextualize Bandel's philosophy within the broader history of somatic therapy. His focus on building and releasing energy echoes the work of the Austrian psychoanalyst Wilhelm Reich and his student Alexander Lowen. In the 1950s, Lowen founded bioenergetic analysis, a therapy built on the premise that emotional traumas are trapped in the body as muscular tension. Lowen believed that to heal these psychological wounds, a patient had to engage in intense, expressive physical movements to open up blocked energy. Bandel seems to be adapting this therapeutic model and weaponizing it for spiritual conquest rather than mere healing.
The connection to Wilhelm Reich and Alexander Lowen is vital for understanding Bandel's mechanics. Reich introduced the concept of character armor, arguing that our bodies literally harden to protect us from emotional pain. Lowen took that further by designing specific, often grueling physical postures designed to stress the body until it began to shake involuntarily, a process meant to discharge that trapped energy. Bandel takes this foundational concept of bioenergetics and expands its scope. He is not just talking about resolving childhood trauma, he is talking about altering reality. He maps this somatic release onto chaos theory. In physics and mathematics, chaos theory studies how highly complex dynamic systems behave. When a system is subjected to increasing stress, it becomes chaotic and unpredictable. Eventually, it hits a bifurcation point, a moment where it must either collapse or reorganize into a higher, more complex state of order. Bandel applies this exact scientific principle to the human soul. The confusion and fear we feel when pushing our limits is the chaos building. The quantum leap he describes is the system reorganizing at a higher level of empowerment.
That application of chaos theory is fascinating, but we should distinguish between different types of stress. The endocrinologist Hans Selye coined the term eustress to describe positive, beneficial stress that enhances function, as opposed to distress, which causes damage. Selye's research demonstrated that a certain amount of friction is required for any biological adaptation. When a weightlifter tears muscle fibers, that microtrauma signals the body to rebuild the tissue stronger. Bandel is demanding a psychological and spiritual equivalent of muscle tearing. He wants the practitioner to generate eustress to the point of structural failure. It is an aggressive departure from the flow state concept popularized by the psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. Csikszentmihalyi defined flow as a state of deep absorption achieved when a person's skills are balanced with the challenge at hand. Flow is typically described as feeling effortless and harmonious. Bandel's astral rupture sounds like the opposite of harmony. It sounds violent.
Bandel is rejecting the effortless nature of flow state, at least in the preliminary stages of his process. For Bandel, the journey to clarity must pass through the fire of intense effort. He anchors this process in a framework of resolving duality. He describes an interaction between two opposing forces, the expansive outward surge of chaos, which he aligns with masculine energy, and the containing inward transformation of rupture, which he aligns with feminine energy. It is the friction between these two forces that births the quantum leap. You cannot have the transformation without the aggressive outward push. This is why he challenges the reader to adopt daily rituals of excess. For instance, he suggests a surge journal where you list 3 energy forms, such as running, meditating, or even flirting, and intentionally push one of them to an uncomfortable extreme, documenting the subsequent clarity gained. He is turning the pursuit of discomfort into a systematic religious practice.
The gendered framing of those forces, masculine outward expansion meeting feminine inward containment, is a classic esoteric trope found in everything from Taoism to Hermeticism. It is a way of describing the tension required to sustain physical matter. But bringing this down to a practical level, his fearless excess rituals present a significant risk. He instructs readers to choose a bold act, like thrill-seeking or intense prayer, and affirm their own divine nature while touching the bark of an oak tree. Visualizing sap as an immortal surge of energy is a potent psychological anchor. However, instructing an audience to routinely engage in thrill-seeking and relentless exertion ignores the varied baselines of human resilience. A person grappling with clinical anxiety or severe trauma might find that deliberately inducing chaos does not result in a quantum leap, but rather a severe psychological fracture.
The risk of psychological fracture is real, and Bandel does not offer a safety net. His work operates under the assumption that the reader is ready to embrace the identity of a warrior. In Chapter 8, he explicitly states that failure, regret, and even death are illusions for those living fully. This is a radical stoicism combined with esoteric mysticism. By defining effort as the warrior's fuel, he attempts to remove the shame associated with failure. If you push yourself in a marathon until you collapse, society might call that reckless. Bandel calls it sacred. He views any half-hearted attempt as the true failure because it dams up the bioelectrical energy, leaving the individual trapped in a state of confusion. The only way out is through. If you attempt a difficult intellectual task, like studying a complex subject late into the night, the confusion you feel is the energy building. The sudden moment of insight, the sudden breakthrough, is the rupture.
The sudden clarity following intense confusion is a phenomenon documented in cognitive science. When we concentrate intensely on a problem, our prefrontal cortex is working near its capacity. When we finally let go, or when the system gets overloaded and shifts gears, the brain's default mode network takes over, often delivering the solution seemingly out of nowhere. Bandel is taking a verifiable neurological event and layering a profound spiritual mythology over it. By labeling this the generation of energy and rupturing the astral, he gives the practitioner a heroic narrative for their own struggles. Instead of just studying late for a test, the student is battling the forces of stagnation to achieve a divine state. This framing is effective for motivation, but we must interrogate the ultimate goal here. He is not just promising better focus, he is promising godhood. That is a heavy, loaded term that implies infallibility and total dominion over one's reality.
The concept of claiming godhood in this text is less about omnipotence and more about absolute self-actualization and the shedding of fear. Bandel is drawing on a long tradition of self-deification found in various esoteric paths, where the goal is to realize that the immortal self is already divine. The chaos, the effort, and the rituals are mechanisms to strip away the mortal anxieties that blind us to that power. When he asks readers to perform the Chaos Leap ritual, pushing a limit and journaling the clarity, he is training them to associate fear and discomfort with imminent power. If you learn to view your own panic as the fuel for your next evolution, you become very difficult to stop. The oak tree does not fear the wind, it uses the resistance to grow deeper roots and thicker bark.
The oak tree metaphor holds the entire philosophy together. The wind provides the stress, the roots provide the containment, and the structural damage to the bark facilitates expansion. But an oak tree does not intentionally seek out a hurricane. It endures the weather that arrives. Bandel's demand that we manufacture our own hurricanes is the fundamental tension of his work. He is asking us to become both the tree and the storm. It requires a level of relentless self-agitation that forces us to question the value we place on peace. If empowerment is defined purely as excess, then contentment becomes the enemy. We are left with a philosophy that produces highly driven, fearless individuals who may never allow themselves a moment of rest.
Bandel would argue that true joy is only found in the aftermath of that triumph. He believes that the modern conception of peace is actually a form of spiritual lethargy. The joy he points toward is the raw, vibrating satisfaction of having faced a terror, pushed through the physical or mental barrier, and survived. It is the adrenaline-soaked clarity of the bungee jumper the moment the cord catches, or the profound stillness a meditator feels after sitting through hours of physical agony. He is offering a roadmap to those who find the standard advice of moderation suffocating. For people who feel trapped by the mundane, the Oak Matrix Unleashed provides a permission slip to unleash their intensity without shame, turning their daily frustrations into a crucible for divine power.
Joe Bandel's framework challenges the foundational assumptions of how we manage our own energy and boundaries. By reframing chaos and stress not as threats to our well-being, but as the raw materials for a quantum leap in personal power, he offers a daring alternative to a culture obsessed with comfort. Whether viewed as a profound esoteric truth or a dangerous recipe for exhaustion, the mandate to exceed our limits forces us to examine where we are holding back and what we might become if we allowed our own barriers to rupture. If this exploration of energy, chaos, and the limits of human potential sparked a realization for you, please share this episode with someone who is currently pushing through their own barriers.